We've all been there. You were trying to watch something important, and then suddenly your screen froze, right? Or maybe you got that little annoying spinning wheel that starts to go round and around and around, and it's buffering. And so in today's society, we all hate to wait. We want on demand answers and instant fire. But what do you do when your spiritual life feels like it's stuck? It's 99% and still loading. You're listening, but you aren't hearing. You're in the fold, but the shepherd feels miles away. See, today we're going to explore why the generals of faith, like Elijah, hit a wilderness state. And how can we find God's frequency when the fire goes out? Let's lean in. Let's talk about beyond the algorithm, why God sounds like silence. Our focal scripture today is going to be John 10:27. And it reads, "My sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." So to understand this context, we have to look at the ancient Eastern biblical shepherd, the biblical shepherds. See, when we think of the modern shepherd today, we think of dogs barking and running at the back of the flock to push them forward. But see, in the Bible, shepherding was all about leading. It wasn't about pushing. See, it wasn't about driving the sheep from behind. The shepherd didn't just watch the sheep. The shepherd lived with the sheep. The shepherd knew their quirks. He knew which one had a limp. He knew which one had an eating disorder. He knew which one was prone to wander, which is why he could leave the 99 to go back for the one. See, they also lived in a communal fold. And what that means that they had all the sheep put together. And they weren't, and it wasn't a sorting process, right? The sheep weren't branded, they weren't labeled, they weren't distinguished by numbers, markers, and all the shepherds would sleep at the mouth of this fold, this community pen. And then in the morning, one by one, a shepherd would stand at the gate, and each shepherd would give it a unique, subtle call. It was rhythmic. It was a whistle. It was a specific hum. It was a vocal cry. No megaphone, no microphone, no audio system. And when this distinct sound was made, only that shepherd's sheep would lift their head. The sheep didn't analyze the frequency or check the manual. They simply moved because they understood the specific sound that was associated with green pastures, water, and protection. They didn't follow because they understood the destination. They simply followed because they recognized the cadence of safety. See, if you aren't hearing God clearly, it might not be because he's silent. Maybe it's that you're listening for a broadcast, a public noise, instead of a narrowcast, a personal call. Or maybe it's just because you have forgotten the sound of safety. You see, we often listen for God to give us a to-do list. But the sheep, if we learn from them, they listen for God's presence, for their shepherd's presence. They follow the voice simply because they believed in the shepherd, not the destination. They trusted the caller. So now let's look at the prophet Elijah in 1 Kings 19. I want you to go back and check out that chapter. See, people often mistake Elijah's cave moment for a lack of faith, but it clearly wasn't. See, unlike Samuel at an early age, who did not yet know the voice of God, Elijah knew exactly who God was. Elijah was the Mount Carmel prophet. He had called down fire. He was fed by ravens. He did the first resurrection. And it was always God's bandwidth of display of power. But what happened when the fire went out? Elijah hit a wilderness state. He was physically exhausted and emotionally depleted. He was spiritually drained. So when God sent the wind, the earthquake, and the fire, we realize that Elijah never moved. But why? Because Elijah knew God's voice well enough to know that God wasn't in the noise. And the Bible is very intentional about telling us this fact. It lets us know that Elijah was waiting. He was repositioned. And it was only in the thin silence of the whisper that Elijah then wrapped his face in the cloak and stepped out to see the face of God and to hear God. You see, sometimes God stops the fire because he wants to see if we'll still seek the whisper. See, in the wilderness, the silence isn't a desert. It's simply a recalibration from all the noise. See, for Elijah, the fire was just the announcement, and it was the whisper that was his relationship. So, for all of you that grew up streaming, and I'm telling my age, you probably don't know anything about a radio dial. But see, with a radio dial, we had to slowly turn knob until we got multiple stations and we found static. And oftentimes it took us a long time to find that station. But see, your younger generation, you guys are all about the algorithm because the algorithm feeds you what you already like. See, it keeps you in the loop of the familiar. See, when we live in a on-demand world, if we want to hear a song, we just simply stream it. If we want a movie, we simply click it. So for some of you, when your spiritual life is out of whack, it's because it's buffering. You're in a wilderness state because the fire of your last big win has gone out. And you're simply waiting for the next video to autoplay, that thing that's familiar. But see, here's the thing. God is not an algorithm. He does not pop on your feed just because you're scrolling through life. See, we have forgotten what it's like to turn the dial, to eliminate the static. Instead, we're simply shuffling through the day. And we're searching, but not for the frequency of the whisper. We're searching for what's trending. And what we don't realize is that the shepherd is trying to upload peace. He's trying to connect with us. He's trying to give us a signal. So if you're simply shuffling in your spiritual life and listening to whatever sermon or what comes up next, you might simply miss the specific word for your specific season. See, hearing the whisper requires an intentional search. So when your signal is buffering, like your phone, you don't just throw your phone away. What do? You move closer to the router, closer to the source, and reposition yourself. See, it's not about tuning out God. It's about tuning in. It's about finding a quiet frequency and learning where and how the shepherd is speaking. See, if we go back to John 10:27, Jesus says, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me." Notice he says they listen, which is an ongoing action. In the Greek, listen, akeo, means an active, intentional tuning in. That's the radio dial of life. So to do this, we have to lower the floor noise. See, the shepherd's whistle is lost in a thunderstorm. So if your life is 24/7 digital noise, then you're drowning out the whisper. And secondly, a shepherd's voice brings calm to his flock. If the voice you're hearing brings frantic, anxiety, or shame, then guess what? That's not the shepherd. That's wind or fire. See, God's voice is even when it corrects us. It carries a weight of peace. And lastly, a shepherd doesn't change his call every day. God's whisper will always harmonize with his word. He will never whisper a direction that contradicts his nature. And that's why the sheep know exactly what shepherd they're following. So the next part of the scripture says, they know him and they will follow him. So if you're in a wilderness state and your fire has gone out and you're not hearing God, guess what? He still knows your frequency, even when you can't hear his. So here's a few tips to hear him clear this week. Number one, stop chasing the fire. Don't be discouraged because there are no goosebumps. You see, Elijah found God in the quiet, after the spectacle, after the fire. And number two, move a little closer to the router. If you're buffering, get into the word. That is the steady, unchangeable signal that's always there. And then number three, check your cadence. Does the voice bring the shepherd's peace or the world's anxiety? See, your cave is not your graveyard. It's not your waiting room. So this week, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you to step out of your algorithm. I want you to take 10 minutes. No shuffling. No background noise. I just want you to be intentional. Be intentional and sit at the mouth of your cave and say, do like young Samuel. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. See, you don't need a miracle to know that God is there. You just need to be close enough to hear him breathe. So thanks for listening to Faith and Focus. And remember, the voice you need is closer than you think. Be blessed.